Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. It's Thursday, so that means it's time for our starts, sits, and sleepers for week 5 of the NFL season. I'm once again joined by Logan Glaser, contributing writer here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. Logan joins me every week for the starts, sits, and sleepers. Logan, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff. Well, we got a game kicking off tonight with two injured running backs, so we got that to look forward to.
Just what everybody wants to see. It's a Naheem Hines, Melvin Gordon showdown.
Exactly. Love it.
Should be riveting football. And there's also another London game this week. We
There
must.
is. Yeah, I enjoyed that last week. Got to wake
Yeah,
up
I did
from
too.
football.
I don't think a lot of the Alvin Kamara owners enjoyed it though, did they?
No, they should have done
No,
it.
that was a unfortunate situation. Hopefully, nothing like that happens
For sure.
with everybody. But let's get into these start, sits, and sleepers. Logan, we do each position: quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end. Tell you who we like, we don't like for the week. So, Logan, let's kick it off with the QB spot. Who's a start for you this week at QB?
Yeah, I'm going to be starting Trevor Lawrence. He had a terrible rookie season to start off, but he has so far have been having a great sophomore season. So, especially with the help of having Travis Etienne back in that backfield, definitely helps him. As along with Christian Kirk, who's been a very good wide receiver for them. Lawrence faced Philadelphia week 4. He had okay stats, but he's got a really nice stretch of games coming up weeks 5 through 10 that I really like his matchups, starting with Houston this week. So I'm going to be starting him in my lineups.
Yeah, and I like Jared Goff. Kind of surprising that I would have him as a start, but at this point, he's played so well. He's actually 5th overall in QB scoring. Last week, he had nobody left at receiver. Josh Reynolds was his top option. TJ Hawkinson was there too, and he had his best game of the season. He scored a season high 38 fantasy points, and he could have his receiving options back this week, which I think bodes well for him. He also has 4 touchdown passes, 2 of his last 3 games. That defense is not very good, so he has to try to play catch up a lot. And also with DeAndre Swift banged up too, that means they have to throw the ball a little more also. So I like Goff this week against New England. They're pretty good defense, but they actually allow the 9th most fantasy points to QBs, and they've allowed 8 passing touchdowns as well. So I'm rolling with Goff. I think he's still a good play this week, even if he's down a couple of his receivers once again.
Yeah, I like that play, especially in a couple of weeks away from getting Jameson Williams back too. That's going to be
Yeah,
another.
just got news that he's ramping it up, and
Yeah.
he could be back in the mix soon. All right, flip side, Logan, sits. Who you sitting at QB?
Yeah, I'm sitting Marcus Mariota this week. So last week he only had 6 fantasy points, and I thought that was going to be a shootout game between Atlanta and Cleveland. 6 fantasy points against that, and now he's going to be going at Tampa Bay. I just hate this matchup for Marcus Mariota. We also have Kyle Pitts, who's questionable coming in this matchup. Even though Pitts hasn't really been having a great season for receiving, it's still a huge loss to that offense if he's unable to go. So I'm going to be sitting Marcus Mariota.
All right, my sit is a new starting quarterback, and it's Kenny Pickett. So I'm going to preface this by saying I like Pickett a lot going forward. I like him for the offense. I like him for all their weapons. I think he's a big bonus over Mitchell Trubisky. But that said, I don't like his matchup at all this week. He's going to go against Buffalo. Very good team. Second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. First overall against a pass. Just an awful first matchup for Pickett. Like I said, I like him a lot going forward, though. I think he's going to be a streaming option. He impressed me in relief last week. I know he had 3 interceptions. They weren't really his fault, though. And those were his only 3 incompletions in the game. I think he's just a big plus for that offense, but I don't like him at all this week. And I would steer clear of him in that tough matchup against Buffalo. All right, how about a sleeper at QB, Logan?
Yeah, sleeper, I'm going to go with Cooper Rush. I'm only going to be starting him in leagues that you don't have really many other options. There are a couple quarterbacks this week that have really tough matchups. So out of all those quarterbacks, I like going with Cooper Rush. If you're on the fringe between Cooper Rush and say like a Baker Mayfield or any other quarterbacks down around there, he hasn't had any weeks above 19.8 fantasy points. He's been pretty consistent, but the thing that is amazing is that Cowboys are 3-0 in his starts. They're facing at the Rams. So I really like that matchup. The Rams have given up 31, 27, 12, and 24 points. So the Rams are actually a bottom 10 defense so far this year, which is very surprising with all the star powers that they have. So I like this matchup for Cooper Rush this week.
Yeah, that secondary for the Rams has not been good. They're still very good against the run, but man, they can be had through the air. So I like that rush call as well, Logan. My sleeper's Carson Wentz. So I think he's turned into pretty much a matchup play. He got off to a great start this year, but he had great matchups against Jacksonville and Detroit. He's played tougher defenses, Eagles and Cowboys, done nothing. So it just shows me that you can trust him against the bad teams, don't trust him against the good teams. And I think he has a good matchup this week against Tennessee. They've really struggled to stop the pass this year. They allow the sixth most fantasy points to quarterbacks. I think Wentz returns to his big ways in this matchup and has one of his good games. So if you're looking for a QB to stream, I would consider playing Carson Wentz in week 5. Let's move on to running back, Logan. Who's your start at the running back spot?
Yeah, I'm going to be starting Jeff Wilson. So he has been a very consistent option for fantasy owners for the past 3 weeks. His games have gone 13.6, 13.4, and 12.3. With the lowest at 12.3, I'll take that in my running back 2 spot. So I think he's got an absolutely great matchup this weekend. He's playing at Carolina, and this is probably the most lopsided defense with offense possible in the NFL, with Carolina having the worst possible offense, with San Francisco having the best defense. So I think San Francisco offense is going to have the ball the majority of the time. They're going to get out to the lead, and they're going to run the ball with Wilson.
Yeah, Wilson's been Mr. Consistent this year. I like him this week as well. My start is James Robinson with Jacksonville. So he had his first rough game of the season last week, ran 8 times for just 29 yards. That was on the road in the rain against arguably the best team in the NFC right now, Philadelphia. Very good defense. So I'm not too worried about that. Remember, he had 3 straight games with touchdowns and at least 15 fantasy points to start the season. So I look for him to get back to his big ways this week. You mentioned with Trevor Lawrence, they play Houston. Just a really good matchup for this offense. Houston really struggles against the run as well. They allow the most fantasy points to running backs in the season, 31st overall against the run. So I think Robinson's going to come back this week and have a huge, huge game for Jacksonville. All right, a sit, Logan. Who you sitting?
Yeah, I'm going to be sitting James Conner this week. So as you just mentioned, Philadelphia has an amazing defense, and what they specialize in, especially, is stopping the run, and that is exactly what they're going to do to James Conner, I believe, this week. So Conner has been off to a very slow start for Arizona. I mean, he doesn't have any games above 10 fantasy points, which is very surprising coming in at that round 2, round 3 ADP, and he's just looked very iffy off the ball so far, and I think they're going to get down to I think Philadelphia is going to get out to a lead, and they're going to turn away from James Conner in this matchup.
All right, my sit is Ezekiel Elliott with the Dallas Cowboys. Another guy really off to a quiet start this year. He's getting the work. He has at least 15 carries, 3 straight games, but he averages just 56.8 rushing yards per game and has just 1 touchdown on the year. And also, he's just not getting work in the passing game. He has just 5 catches on the season. I don't think he's a plug-and-play player at this point anymore. Just not getting enough work in the passing game, not producing big enough fantasy numbers. And we mentioned this Rams team, not good against the run. I mean, not good against the pass, but they're good against the run. They allow the fewest fantasy points to running backs, 7th overall against the run as well, with Aaron Donald stacking that middle up. So I think Dallas is going to really have struggles running the ball in this matchup. And if you have better options than Elliott, I would really consider using them in week 5. All right, a sleeper at running back. Who you got, Logan?
Yeah, my sleeper is going to be Nyheim Hines playing tonight. So with the recent news of Jonathan Taylor being out, this is a big role for Hines to step into. Reports are that Phillip Lindsay and Hines are going to split the backfield. You're going to look for more of Lindsay having those rushes with Hines playing out of the backfield. But I believe that Denver's going to get out to a lead, and that's going to work perfectly into Hines' favor as that pass catching back out of the backfield. So I really like him to put up 10+ points tonight and be my sleeper, and also a great free agent ad if you got him in your league or stashing him on your bench.
Yeah, I like him too. And my sleeper is Devin Singletary with Buffalo. I don't think he's getting enough, love at this point. He's really been pretty good, and his playing time's actually increased. I thought it was going to be kind of a 3-headed monster. I was worried about that situation in Buffalo, but Singletary's the guy. They've been close games, so that's what shows me that they trust Singletary the most. He played 73% of the snaps in week 3, 88% last week. This led to his best production of the season. He has at least 12 fantasy points each of those 2 games. I think he's going to get a lot of chances again this week against the Steelers. They allowed the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. And like I mentioned earlier, I think I could see Pittsburgh getting down in this game, Buffalo getting up pretty big, and kind of running the clock out. And that bodes well for Singletary against Steelers, who allow 131.5 rushing yards per game. So I think Singletary is a really good play at that, number 2 running back spot or flex spot for fantasy teams. Let's move on to receiver now. Logan, who you got as your start for week 5?
Yeah, I'm going to be starting Chris Olave. This rookie wide receiver class has been absolutely insane. Michael Thomas is going to be out again, most likely for the Saints. So Olave is going to step up back into that number 1 wide receiver role for the Saints. So far for the season, he's gotten 12, 23, and 16 in his last 3 weeks. The big question is going to be who's going to be quarterback for them for this week. It's looking like Winston's going to be out again. So Andy Dalton is going to step up back into that QB role for them. But Olave still put up 16 points with Andy Dalton at quarterback, so that doesn't scare me away from him. And he also has a great matchup against Seattle this week.
Yeah, Olave must start for me. I have another Chris as a start. It's Chris Godwin. So I was kind of anxious to see what he did in his first game back from a hamstring injury last week. They threw him into the mix, so he played 83% of the snaps, caught 7 passes for 59 yards on 10 targets. So he looked just fine. He's also returning from a torn ACL, and he looks back to health, in my opinion. Looked great in that game last week. So I would not be too concerned about playing him. He has a great matchup against Atlanta this week. They allow the 6th most fantasy points to receivers. In 2 games against Atlanta last year, Godwin had 19 catches for 205 yards and a touchdown. So I'm expecting big things from Godwin this week in that great matchup against Atlanta. Okay, how about a sit at receiver, Logan?
Yeah, for sit, I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle. So he's still dealing with a groin injury, so he's even questionable to play in this matchup. And then you also got Tua out, and Waddle hasn't had any game. He's had 1 game above 4 receptions so far this season. He had that 1 huge breakout game, but besides that, he's been average in the other 3 games. And last week he only had 5 fantasy points. So with Tua being out, dealing with an injury, I like sitting Waddle this week as they face the Jets.
All right, my sit is DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. So he finally got more looks last week, which was encouraging. He had 11 targets in the game, but he still finished with just 6 catches for 50 yards. So his numbers still weren't great. It was good to see him top double-digit fantasy points, but still not a very good production. And he has just 138 receiving yards all season. He just can't get on the same page as Baker Mayfield. And they got Christian McCaffrey more involved in the passing game last week as well, which I don't think is great news for Moore. And now they play a very good 49ers defense this week. San Francisco's 2nd overall against the pass, allow the 6th fewest fantasy points to receivers. So I just wouldn't mess with Moore at all in this matchup and leave him on my bench still until he really gets it going and shows me something on the field. All right, sleeper now, Logan. Who's your sleeper for?
Yeah, sleeper. He's starting to become a start for everyone, and that's Romeo Dubes. He's could be Green Bay's wide receiver 1. It's kind of split between him and Lazard so far. The last 2 weeks, he's had 13 receptions, 2 touchdowns, put up 21.3 points and 14.7, and he's slowly starting to emerge in Green Bay with the trust building with him and Rodgers, along with Lazard. So they had a great matchup this week playing the Giants. And that's the London game in the morning. So keep an eye out on those players in the morning. And I like him as my sleeper this week.
All right, my sleeper is Robert Woods of the Tennessee Titans. It's kind of hard to call him a sleeper. He's been a proven star in this league, but he's been quiet to start the year. And I'm anxious to see him getting going this week, though. Treylon Burks is out, so that means Woods is going to get more looks. I believe in the passing game, he scored his first touchdown of the season last week, had 4 receptions each of his last 3 games. So he's getting some work, just not a huge amount of work. And I think it's going to go up, though, with Burks out of the lineup. He might be leaned on a little more, especially this week against Washington. They allow the 2nd most fantasy points to receivers. So I think this is a week I would feel comfortable playing Woods putting him in my lineup, I should say. All right, let's move on to tight end, Logan. Last position we want to look at. Logan, who's your start at tight end in week 5?
Yeah, my start this week is going to be Dallas Goedert. Arizona, they're playing Arizona, who ranks dead last in defending the tight end position. I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game, as we kind of mentioned before. I do think Philadelphia is going to get out to a big lead in this game. He's been consistent so far as a tight end. He's currently ranked 9th overall in the tight end spot, but this has been a very up and down tight end class, as we mentioned on almost all these videos. But the one consistent tight end so far has been Dallas Goedert, who's put 4 solid games so far together. So I like him as my start this week.
Yeah, I like him a lot as well. My start, going on a little bit of a limb here. I know you already mentioned it, But Kyle Pitts is my start for this week. I know he's battling a hamstring injury, so definitely want to keep an eye on that. I don't think it's serious. I think it's more of a precautionary thing. But again, keep an eye on the practice reports and player notes just to be sure. But if he plays, I like him in a game. I think the Atlanta's going to be down and down big and having to throw the ball a lot. I know you don't like Marcus Mariota, and I don't either, but I still think Pitts will get some work in this game. He had 2 solid games against the Bucks last year, 9 catches for 121 yards. And in week 5 last year, scored 26.9 fantasy points. He got off to a really slow start in the first 4 games last season. Everybody was panicking as well. So I think he's going to get it going. And I think if you have him, you got to keep playing him as long as he's healthy and in the lineup. And the Bucks also struggle against the tight end. They allow the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. So again, if Pitts is in the lineup and he's playing, I think you got to play him. Just too much draft capital. You have too much draft capital in him, and he has too high of a ceiling for me to bench him at this point. And I think he'll do well as long as he plays this week. All right, sit at tight end, Logan. Who do you got?
Yeah, talking about draft capital, George Kittle is my sit for this week at the tight end position, and he's also very high on that draft capital. So he's had 2 straight down weeks. Kyle Shanahan kind of mentioned how they're kind of going to be using him as more of a blocker this season. So that kind of scares me away from Kittle a bit. So it all depends who your other tight end is on your roster to start him. Overall, I don't really love Kittle this week. If you have someone like Pat Freiermuth, it'd be close, but I'd probably start Freiermuth over Kittle personally this week until Kittle can rebound and get that good solid week under his belt. So I'm going to be sitting him this week.
Yeah, he's been a real disappointment. I mean, he's getting next to nothing in that pass game. I don't understand why you'd waste his talent as a blocker.
Yeah.
Crazy to me. Oh well, that's why I'm not an NFL coach. My sit is Will Dissly. So I've been talking him up on my wavering videos and in my articles, but I'm not playing him this week. I still think he's kind of a touchdown dependent play. He scored last week, has touchdowns 3 or 4 games, but I don't see him finding the end zone against New Orleans this week. They allow the fewest fantasy points at tight ends. They're good against the pass. I think if you have better options at tight end this week, I don't think it's a good one to stream Will Dissly. I would just avoid him in week 5. All right, how about a sleeper, Logan?
Yeah, sleeper, I'm going with Logan Thomas. As you kind of mentioned earlier with Wentz, I really think this is going to be a game that Commanders offense kind of starts clicking. Jahan Dotson is going to be out for Washington this week, so I think that's going to provide even more targets for Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin. So I really think this is a really good spot for those wide receivers along with Logan Thomas. So I really like him as my sleeper this weekend.
Yeah, you have to look at what's going on around these players as well. We saw that last week with T.J. Hawkinson. Everybody was hurt in Detroit, and look at the game he had. Just a monster game. So it's not just about the players that are hurt. It's how it affects the team around them as well. So keep an eye on that stuff with these injury reports. All right, my sleeper is Juwan Johnson. So he had 3 catches for 33 yards last week. Not great, but he has multiple catches, 3-4 games, and he's playing a lot. He's played at least 68% of the snaps, 3-4 games. He leads all the Saints tight ends in playing time. He's a big play threat in that passing game. We've already talked about how this is a good matchup against Seattle. They allow the most fantasy points to tight ends as well. So, again, injuries at receiver for New Orleans, I think it could open the door for Johnson maybe to make some big plays in what looks like a favorable matchup for him. So I think he's a guy I would consider maybe more so in like a DFS format than my standard leagues. But still, I think he's somebody I would consider playing this week.
Yeah.
All right, Logan, thanks for joining me on Start, Sits, and Sleepers for Week 5 of the NFL season. Really appreciate it. A lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
All right. Good luck, everybody, in Week 5. Appreciate you guys watching the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. We appreciate that. And good luck to all of you in your Week 5 games. Good luck. All right, this has been Jeff Paur for RealTime Fantasy Sports.
And this has been Logan Glaser from RealTime Fantasy Sports.
Have a great day, everyone.